Okay, let the games begin. This will be the first topic starting video for Off-Center Politics. It is, let's see, it's June 6th. It's Sunday, June 6th. So let's get the first week started. The topic of discussion will be government regulation of industry. And me being the progressive that I am, I think it's pretty clear that a reasonable degree of government regulation of various industries is not only a good idea, but it's required in order for society to have some degree of safety, for society, if they expect some degree of safe operation of these industries and safe products from these industries, or safe delivery of whatever products these various industries create. So obviously the poster child for an unsafe industry right now is offshore oil drilling. Thank you, BP in the Gulf of Mexico. In that particular case, the BP was in gross violation of a number of government regulations, the most important of which for that particular case was that they have an emergency plan in place for how to deal with the blowout, and that the government approved this emergency plan. This particular oil rig did not have such a plan approved, and therefore when it blew out, oops, what are we going to do? We don't know. And here we are, 2 and change months later, almost 3 months later, and oil's still gushing. So in that regard, government regulation is not only good, but required. Some other examples we can look at that illustrate this would be the mining disaster we saw earlier this year in West Virginia at Massey Mining, or at a mine run by Massey Mining, or Massey Energy rather, my apologies. Now, some counter-arguments to this might be that, certain unreasonable regulations put an undue burden on the industry, they have to raise their prices for the consumer, and the free market will shake out the problems anyway, and the best policies for running these companies will be implemented. Do you really think it cost Massey that much extra money to make sure methane doesn't build up in the coal mines that ultimately exploded and killed however many people? Is it really that much of a burden? I don't think so. Some other examples we can look at recently are the contaminated toys from a couple years back. Remember those? Lead paint. Also, the various outbreaks of mad cow disease, since meat packers were allowed, rather than having some independent group oversee their safety, they were allowed to do it themselves. Not smart, because typically when industries are able to, or rather allowed, to oversee their own safety regulations, or enforce their own safety regulations, they do a really bad job of it. Going back, we can see that these government-imposed regulations tend to do what they're supposed to do. They tend to work. You could go all the way back to Triangle Shirtwaist. There was this terrible fire in the workplace, killed a bunch of people. Government says, no, you have to do X, Y, and Z to make sure this can't happen again, and guess what? That worked. Hasn't happened again. Great. But you'll still hear the argument that, well, the companies can self-regulate themselves, or the industries can self-regulate themselves. And to counter that, you just have to look at Kingston, Tennessee to see that that is complete BS. In Kingston, Tennessee, there was a so-called clean coal-fired power plant. Rather than emitting lots of nasty things into the atmosphere, they simply sequestered and stored them on site. It was a slurry called coal ash that was stored in these unlined open pits that were basically kept behind dams next to the river where the power plant operated. And in December, it might have been December of 2007, I believe it was, one of these dams basically broke, the coal ash slurry spewed everywhere, destroyed hundreds and probably thousands of acres, people had to be relocated. It cost millions, if not billions of dollars to clean up this giant environmental disaster, and yet in the, over 2 years since then, not a single other clean coal facility in the United States has taken any measures to line their tanks, put them in a more secure tank, do anything. And this is something that's not even regulated by the EPA in the first place. Nickel, cadmium, mercury, really nasty heavy metals in here, they're completely unregulated. And you'd think, with a disaster of that magnitude, the rest of the industry would say, yeah, it's a good idea to, maybe make this a little bit safer. But no one's done it. And until the government says it has to be done, it won't be done. And in fact, we'll just have repeats of Kingston until safety measures are imposed upon the industry, because we can't rely upon them to do it themselves. If history teaches us anything, it's that we can't rely upon industries to regulate themselves. The government needs to do it in a responsible and reasonable way. My time is up. All yours.